Paris's treachery. Thus, the Greeks set sail with 1,000 ships, and their journey led them across the Aegean Sea to the gates of Troy. But it wasn't just a mortal conflict. The gods themselves were deeply invested in the war. Aphrodite, having promised Helen to Paris, supported Troy. Hera, enraged at Paris for favoring Aphrodite, sided with the Greeks. Athena, too, lent her wisdom to the Greek warriors, seeking to see her chosen side victorious. Zeus, for the most part, remained neutral, though his decisions often influenced the course of the war. The war dragged on for 10 long years. Heroes from both sides fell, and the mightiest of them all, Achilles, would become both the hope and the despair of the Greeks. The gods themselves fought and schemed, their divine interventions shaping the battlefields below. The war wasn't just a clash of armies, but a cosmic struggle where the destinies of both gods and mortals were intertwined. In the end, the fall of Troy was inevitable. But the roots of this legendary war, which caused so much destruction and death, lay in the petty squabbles of the gods. It was their jealousy, pride, and ambitions that fueled the fire of the Trojan War, leaving both men and gods to bear the consequences of their choices. And thus, the war that began with a golden apple and a goddess's vanity became one of the most famous stories in history, a reminder that even the gods are not immune to the chaos they create, and mortals are often the ones to pay the price. As the war dragged on, both sides faced unspeakable losses, and the whims of the gods continued to stir chaos. Among the greatest of the warriors was Achilles, the invincible Greek hero, son of the sea nymph Thetis and the mortal king Peleus. His very presence on the battlefield was a source of terror for the Trojans, for Achilles, unlike any other warrior, was believed to be invulnerable. Legend had it that when Achilles was a child, his mother had dipped him into the river Styx, rendering his entire body impervious to harm, save for one small part, his heel where her hand had held him. But despite his near invulnerability, Achilles had a fatal flaw: his pride. It was this pride that would ultimately lead to tragedy. As the war reached its midpoint, Achilles had a fierce disagreement with Agamemnon, the commander of the Greek forces. Agamemnon, in a moment of arrogance, seized Briseis, a Trojan woman who had been awarded to Achilles as a prize of war. Achilles, enraged by this insult, refused to fight any longer, withdrawing himself and his forces from the battlefield. With Achilles absent, the Greeks began to falter. The Trojans, led by their noble prince Hector, took advantage of Achilles' absence and pushed the Greeks back to their ships. Hector was a warrior of unmatched courage and honor, respected by both his people and his enemies. As the greatest of the Trojan warriors, Hector had long been the bulwark of Troy, and with Achilles gone, his victories were decisive. The gods, too, watched these events with great interest. Some, like Athena and Hera, grew increasingly frustrated with Achilles' stubbornness, while others, like Apollo, favored Hector and sought to protect him. But the tides of war were not easily controlled, even by the gods. It was not until the death of Patroclus, Achilles' closest companion and beloved friend, that Achilles was drawn back into the fight. Patroclus, seeing the Greeks near defeat, had donned Achilles' armor and led the Myrmidons, Achilles' fierce soldiers, into battle. Believing him to be Achilles, the Trojans retreated in fear, but Hector, the finest of the Trojan princes, confronted Patroclus and killed him in single combat. When Achilles learned of Patroclus' death, his grief was boundless. In a rage fueled by sorrow and vengeance, Achilles re-entered the battlefield with a renewed fury. He sought Hector above all others, determined to avenge his fallen friend. Their confrontation outside the walls of Troy became one of the most famous duels in history. Achilles, driven by his divine strength and unmatched skill, pursued Hector around the walls of Troy. Hector, knowing his fate was sealed, nonetheless stood his ground. He fought bravely, but in the end, Achilles' wrath was too great. With a single fatal blow, Achilles ended Hector's life. Yet, Achilles' fury did not end with Hector's death. He desecrated the prince's body, dragging it behind his chariot around the walls of Troy, as both the Trojans and gods watched in horror. Thank you for watching the whole video. If you find it interesting, Please give me a like and subscribe to the channel.